The man who changed the course of history in Ireland spent his last years alone and virtually unknown in Newfoundland. Best-selling and prize-winning author Linden MacIntyre explores the little-known life of Sir Hugh Tudor in his new book, An Accidental Villain. And you kind of just stumbled upon him at some point and spent years researching.
Yeah, he became a footnote, and that was part of his secret for survival. He didn't make big speeches. He didn't try to make a personality out of himself. He just kept under the radar. And I tripped over him in an academic paper in a footnote about the meeting between Churchill and Roosevelt in the middle of the Second World War. And I got curious. Who was this guy?
Who is this guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this guy was he was commander of an Irish police force, the Royal Irish Constabulary, and there was a lot of trouble in Ireland in 1920.
They still call it the Troubles.
They still call it the Troubles, and the government of Britain, which controlled Ireland at the time, decided we're not going to dignify this by calling it a war. We're going to call it a crime wave. And so they put a police force in charge of it, but they loaded up the police force to be a paramilitary outfit, and they put an army general in charge of it, and that was Hugh Tudor.
Mm-hmm. And this force was known as the Black and Tans because they didn't even really have, it was the black from the police uniforms and the tans from the military.
They loaded up the Irish police force, which was before this mostly Irish people, but they loaded it up with English and Scottish veterans of the First World War, many of whom hated Irish people to start with, and they loaded it up with that, and they increased the size of the force so much that they didn't have proper uniforms, so they mixed up military and police uniforms, and for a lot of them, and they called them the Black and Tans. Mm-hmm. And they became symbolic with ruthlessness, violence, and repression in Ireland. And to this very day, a lot of people never heard of Tudor, but they all heard about the Black and Tans, which were under his command.
Right, and they were in command in like a very military fortress.
Yeah, in the middle of Dublin Castle.
Dublin Castle.
And they lived in there. They were practically prisoners in the castle. When they ate dinner in the evenings, they had their revolvers and their guns on the table just in case. You couldn't even trust the people that were serving you. Mm-hmm. And they were stuck in there, and they became embittered, especially he became embittered because he didn't really care about Irish politics, but a number of the people who he brought in from the British Army to work with him were assassinated, and he knew he was high on a list for assassination.
So
he
just kind of slips
bitter.
Out of the country.
And then, of course, after this thing was settled, and he did his little stretch in Palestine where he was supposed to carry on similar kind of police work. Then his best friend in the world, Winston Churchill, who put him in this situation, lost power. The government that hired him collapsed. So he's stranded. And he knows he's on a hit list. He knows that there are Irish people all over the world. He wouldn't even recognize, Irish people are friendly and funny and dressed in civilian clothes, but one of them was going to shoot him.
Yeah.
And so where do you go to avoid that? The Irish actually hit a guy in Central Park, New York, because they considered him a traitor. They blew away a senior British Army officer on his own doorstep in the posh section of London. So Tudor knew that he had a very dodgy grasp on a long life.
And so hard to research this book because he kept no diary of his 23 months.
No diary, and these people were all writing self-serving memoirs, justifying themselves, diaries that made them all look like heroes. He didn't do any of that. He moved, may I say?
Yes.
Not spoiler, to Newfoundland.
Not a spoiler, no.
He went to Newfoundland because he first of all, it's hard to get to and hard to get out of. He had a battalion of very, very brave Newfoundland soldiers under him in the First World War. He was a divisional commander. One of them, at the age of 17, won the Victoria Cross. So in Newfoundland, which is a lot of Irish people in Newfoundland, but they overlooked his Irish part of his life, and they said this guy was a hero of the First World War. A lot of Newfoundlanders served and died and did great service under his command. So okay, we can put up with him. And they put up with him, as Newfoundlanders will do, for 40 years.
Yes.
He lived a quiet, dignified, respectable life in Newfoundland.
And his funeral, hardly anybody came.
Hardly anybody came. And it's interesting, his funeral was just months away from Churchill's funeral.
Yeah.
The whole world went to Churchill's funeral.
Yeah.
There were more people watched Churchill's funeral on TV than watched Kennedy's funeral on TV a few months before.
Wow.
And this fellow goes to the graveyard with about 6 people
I could talk for half an hour
Yes,
about
okay.
this.
But thank you.
They're
Thank
telling
you
us
for-
we're run out
yes,
of
I
time.
know.
An Accidental Villain, Linden MacIntyre's fabulous new book. Thanks for writing this and,
Thank you,
and
Annette.
for all the research done in this.
Thank
I
you.
know a lot of academics worked on it too, but you made it sound like a story, not a history
Excellent.
book.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be here.